the all the blessings in my life, and showing true gratitude for the things that I have going on around me and the people that are in my life. So I want to start off today by saying thank you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy the time with your family. And this week's lesson really feeds into that. The challenge this week was for us to kind of figure out what goes on in our lives, what drains us of all of our time, um, and what fulfills us when we're doing those things, and the things that really have no value to us in our life, right? They really serve no purpose but to waste time. And so I really wanted to thank Cam for actually allowing me the space to do this lesson, because obviously you guys all know that this is something very near and dear to my heart. One thing that I hear often from leaders, and it drives me bananas, and that's when they say, "Oh my gosh, you need to practice more time management." And when you think about the meaning of the word management, manage means you effectively can change something. And I'm here to tell you all that you cannot change time. Right? Time is infinite. Time is a definite thing, and your 60 seconds ticks away just like my 60 seconds. So I like to reframe that, and I don't like to say time manages. How do I manage myself in that time? Right? And so we come up with systems to allow us to do that. And with that, we'll go ahead and dive into how do we create these systems, right? Um, Time, when we don't properly utilize our time, it could literally send us into a low efficiency, low energy level. It can really bog us down and cause us to get overwhelmed and feel like that we're never getting anything completed. And so one of the things that I would ask you to do as we move forward to this is think about those things that are most important to you, the things that are the priorities, the things that you really just need to get done. And hopefully the idea is that you will go ahead, as we're going through this lesson this week, and go ahead and start building kind of a system. And oh, by the way, I'm going to throw this out there. If you have trouble with this, mark your calendars. March 26th, 27th, we have the Elevate experience going to be taking place at the Solano. What's it called again? The Solano
Innovation.
Innovation Center.
Innovation Center. Absolutely. And it's going to be in Fairfield, California. So you'll see more information on that coming out shortly. But I want you to start building that structure so that if you decide that you want to partake in that, you'll come in with a tool that we can actually grow on. Okay. So let's get started. What do we do when we have all kinds of priorities in our life? I get asked many times, how am I able to do so much, but it seems like I do so little? Right? I have a really bad habit of being somewhat of a social butterfly. God gave me the gift of gab. I love to talk. I love to talk to people. However, I have priorities and I have things in my life that are just non-negotiables that I need to accomplish on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and my short-term, long-term, medium-term goals, right? So how am I able to still stay on task with some of those things at the same time of spending time with my family and friends, and walking the halls and jaw jacking, as I like to say, right? So it's all about how I structure my day. And one of the things that I do is I understand what my non-negotiable tasks are. What are those tasks? For many of us in the community, we all have businesses. Some of us have day jobs that we try to balance with that. So figuring out what are your non-negotiables, what do you feel is going to take the priority in your day, right? So we like to design our 3 priorities per day. Right. So when you do that, it prevents you from becoming overwhelmed, and it allows us to really focus on those things that matter most to us. Right. Let's just face it. Our days are chaotic and we have a lot going on. So coming up with those 3 daily tasks. And then once we come up with those daily tasks, right, do you design or do you set aside time? So we know through psychiatry, we know through studying of the brain that the human body is just most productive in the morning, right? So When you have those three priorities, are you setting time early in the morning to really focus on them? That's when our brain is at its clearest. That's where we just woke up from a night of rest. Hopefully, you had a good night rest. And now you're actually able to be hyper focused, right? So, typically for me, I like to make that time between 9 and 11. So I give myself those few hours because I know that I'm going to optimally perform at those times because I just got my workout on. I just had a great breakfast and now, bam, I'm ready to go. So I stack those three priorities during that time frame because I know that that's where I'm going to be the most focused on, and that's where I can really hone in on those things, right? I don't bog myself down with emails at that time. I set aside time for emails because emails are just, frankly, they're kind of a lower priority. If I set three tasks that are like what I feel to be my priority for that day, and email's not in it, guess what? I can slide my emails. Not that I'm not going to get to those emails, but those emails are not the priority. And I have a time, right? Because of a little tool that I like to call time blocking, right? It's setting aside time every day for certain tasks. I will tell you that whatever time system you create for yourself, the most important thing is going to be not so much that you've created this plan and that you're taking the action on this, but it's the discipline to hold to those time frames. So when I set 2 hours to be focused on my three priorities, that's what I'm doing. I'm focusing on those priorities and I'm not doing anything else. And oh, by the time when that 11 o'clock time rolls around, hey, I'm no longer focusing on them. I have the discipline to stop working on those things, even if I'm at a high level of execution at that point, and I know that, oh man, if I give myself 20 more minutes, I can knock this task out. That's not how we're designed to do that, because when you take that 20 extra minutes to finish that plan that you already have other time set for, what do you think that does for all the other tasks that you've kind of created for yourself? It's going to start this snowball effect where it starts pushing everything to the right, as we like to say. And that's when you start to get overwhelmed with those tasks, right? So making sure that we have the discipline to put those things down and move on to the next priority, move on to the next time block task that you have set for yourself throughout that day, right? And keep in mind that these personal systems that you design, they're going to evolve. They're never going to stay constant because our priorities will shift, right? Today, our priority might be one thing, but tomorrow our priority, that may not be our priority, right? So you have to be very intentional, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the lesson about how do I prepare myself for the next day, right? It's an evolution, right? It's a repetitive evolution with flexibility, right? So how does that three-part system look like? How do we design that around what's important? It all starts with designing our weeks and designing our weeks around outcomes and not task, right? What I mean by that is, what do we need to complete in the next week, right? What goal have I set that I want to complete, and not breaking it down into those tasks and say, I want to complete this task, I want to complete this task. No, what is my outcomes that I want this week? This week, I want to reach 500 potential clients. Let's just say that's the number. So that's my outcomes, because that's my measurement tool, right? When we start talking about our goals and everything, that's how I'm going to measure the success of how I blocked out my time this week. So now that I know that by Friday I want to have reached out to 500 people, now the next question I'm going to ask myself are, what are the steps that are going to allow me to get there, right? So those are the priorities that we're going to design throughout our week to get us to that goal at the end of the week. So I'm going to allot, just say 1 hour, 5 days to meet that outcome, right? So all I need to do is, I know that I have 5 days to complete this task. I know that I want to reach 500 people. So I'm going to break it out to an hour a day. And in that hour, I'm going to make sure that I send out, or whatever method you're using, to reach 100 people, right? Because that's all I need to get to for that day is 100 people. So the next question I ask about that is, okay, how do I automate that to better utilize my time? Who do I need to pick up the phone and call versus who do I need to, send out, my what I like to call my spam mail to, right? I'm going to achieve my priority for that day of reaching 100 people, no matter how I do it, whether I'm calling or I'm sending out an email, or if I'm just going live on social media to actually talk and keep track of how many people are logging in to watch what I'm saying, right? And I'm not gonna go past that hour. Once that hour is up, okay, it's time for me to stop that, because I know that I have 4 more days of an hour to actually meet that goal at the end of the week. So I move on to my next one, right? I remove the low priority, or the low value task during those times. And I focus solely on what it is that I set out to do. And that requires discipline to do that, right? Everything that we talk about here, in the community, throughout all of our lessons, the one takeaway that I will say is constant, and that is action and consistency, right? We can't just say we're going to do these things. We have to actually implement them. And that's okay if we implement these things and they don't go the way we plan on them going the first time. But that's where that flexibility comes in, to be able to say, okay, I do need to readdress this somehow. Making sure that our goals and our outcomes aren't, making sure they're not far-fetched, making sure that they are something that's clearly obtainable, right? That goes back into that whole SMART goals thing, right? So we're building on all these techniques and tools that we've been given throughout the community, because they all kind of work hand in hand, right? So now that we've got that kind of design laid out, how do we actually prioritize the tasks that we have going on? So I like to use a tool, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but Dwight D. Eisenhower kind of talked about this during his presidency, from when he was a military commander to being the president of the United States. And it's called the Eisenhower Matrix, right? So basically what that does is he broke it into 4 quadrants, right? He says, tasks that are not important, tasks that are important, tasks that are not urgent, and then and tasks that were urgent. So the way you work that is you kind of figure out which task that you have to do, and you figure out whether it's urgent, whether it's important. If it's not important, you're going to put it in the not important category. And then if it's in that not important, now you got to ask yourself, what's the urgency of that? It's not important, but there is an urgency on it. So there's a high likelihood that we have some things that are not important in our lives and in our businesses, but they do have a high urgency, right? So that's going to kind of be one of those it's going to be somewhere in the middle of the pack. But then you're going to have those tasks that are, they're going to be high importance, high urgency. Guess what? Those go to the top of our list, right? And then we have those tasks that are low importance and low urgency, right? Those are the things that are at the bottom of the list. And here's a little secret about those tasks. Those tasks we most likely can strike out, because we don't need to waste our time doing them. Those are the tasks that you might be able to actually delegate to others. Those are the tasks that you might be able to automate. Those are the tasks that you might be able to just strike, because there's no ROI on them. There's no return on the investment for you to do those tasks. So those are some of the tasks that really causes us to think about and say, hey, you know what? I really just don't need to do that, right? So that's how we're able to remove those low priority tasks, or those time wasters, as we like to call them, right? One of the biggest time wasters that I have is, even though the people that I follow on social media, right? I follow your Simon Sinek's, your Mel Robinsons, all these, I follow these people because I love to listen to what they say. But at the end of the day, is there a value of what I'm listening to? Right? So that's obviously low importance, and it's also low urgency for me to sit and watch what they're talking about. So do I really need to do them? Other than sometimes feeding into myself, if I have time, if I make time for that, absolutely, I'm able to do that. But when I have my priority listing and what's very important for me that day, that is not a task that's not a task that's going to grow myself or my business at that moment, right? Not saying that I can't learn from them. I'm just saying, based on the three priorities that I've set for that day, that's a low priority for those types. So I'm not going to spend any of my peak hours of the day, right? That 9 to 11. I'm not going to spend time during 9 to 11 on what Simon Sinek is saying online. Right? That's more of my personal time that I built for myself because of these systems, right? So how do we stay in a proactive standpoint versus a reactive, right? Because let me tell you something, and you guys have probably experienced this in your businesses, that someone reaches out to you and says, oh, I need this. And we automatically, because we're business minded, we want to go to that reactive state. We want to say, I got you, I can do this here. And we start pressing with that, right? So how do we create a proactive approach to that, right? Maybe it's stopping, pausing, thinking about what they're asking for. And oh, by the way, setting the boundary and let them know that, hey, we can definitely do this. What are you looking for as a timeline? Like, when do you want this by? Right? Because when I ask when do they want this by, guess what I'm able to do? I'm able to put it into one of those 4 quadrants to kind of figure out, hey, where does this need to be in my priority list based on the timeline that they're giving me to do this? And how do I actually build this into my system without me being overwhelmed? And that allows me to stay proactive at everything that I'm doing versus reacting to someone else's emergency, right? Because it's not my emergency. I don't care what it is that you need. I can't afford to make your emergency my emergency. So I'm gonna set those boundaries with you, and I'm gonna find out your urgency, right? How fast do you need this? If it's unobtainable, if I can't fit it into my framework, guess what I have to tell you? I have to tell you, hey, I can't do it in this time frame. If you want to stay on board with me, if you value the service that I provide, let's look at how we can get that to you and meet some of your requirements, but also not overwhelm myself. Right? So that goes into that prioritization part of those priorities of your day. Now, I understand that sometimes we take on a lot of things, a lot of priorities, things like that. Sometimes we do have to prioritize everything, and everything may be, that's where that flexibility. But I would challenge ourselves, all of us, to think about when these priorities, and it goes back to something I said earlier, is how do I automate and how do I delegate? Right? What if a client comes to me and they have a high priority, does it have to be Glenn Davis that does it? Does it have to be Percy that does it? Or is it something that I can delegate to other members of the team, right? Do they have the capability? Do they have the awareness? And hey, do they have time allotted? Do they have space to be able to do these things? So that you are able to take on and provide that customer service, but it's not actually you that has to be the one to do it. So is there a system in place that allows us to do that? Hey, guess what we do to be able to set these systems up, right? We do things like SOPs. You like what I did there? Like, that's why it's so important for us to have those procedures in place, because if we want to best utilize our time, we have to have a process to where I can say to someone else that I'm delegating it to, or I have automations built, or I need to have automations built to do these things. That allows me to go to an assistant and say, hey, you know what? This is very important. I don't have the capacity to do it. It's urgent or not urgent. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to build out an automation so that as we move forward, this is not going to be something that's dropped on us that's going to overwhelm us and it's not going to take away from the more important things that we have to do. Right, digital tools are awesome. I've gotten really good over the past, I'll say probably 12 months. Really got good with my calendar. Right, there's a lot of things inside of our calendars there's automations built into our calendars to help us with things. Right, so once I figure out some of these priorities and things like that, either I will go back. I tend to sit down probably once a day in the evening as I'm prepping for the next day and make sure that I have all those priorities that I've already dictated to myself, that have those timelines. Make sure I put the suspense dates in my calendar and allow my calendar to remind me periodically that, hey, don't forget about this here, so that I know when I need to move certain tasks up on my priority list if I haven't been able to give them allotted time, say today. If I can't give it that allotted time today because of something else, okay, where can I put that on my schedule so that I use the automation in my calendar to remind me that, hey, you know what, you got 5 days or you got 4 days left on this suspense. Now it's time for me to move that up, because now the urgency and the importance has moved up. So now it moves up on my priority list. I didn't waste my time on it before because I had other priorities, but now it's getting to the time where it's starting to be urgent. And so I allow it to I allow it to actually move up the urgency tree. Right. And then I can actually plan it. And that prevents me from getting overwhelmed with everything that we have going on. And that's what allows me to actually do so much and still do the things that I enjoy doing, like getting out talking to people, right? Wasting a little bit of time on video games, or giving time to my family and things of that nature. So I'm able to do so much just because of these little systems that I put in place. And my goal is to even get better now that I've really gotten to the space of automation. Man, automation is going to really, really, if you would, the term that we like to use, right? 10x myself personally, 10x my business, and even 10x relationships that I've built. Right. So having those systems to automate those things is a great great way to manage yourself within the time that you have throughout the day. Let me take a pause right there real quick and see if there's any questions. Is there any questions from anyone? Need me to elaborate on something, talk a little bit more in depth, or a how-to question maybe?
So so the Eisenhower matrix, do you ever have times when two or three things are potentially equally important and you have to decide which one's going to fall potentially by the wayside? Or do you then have to increase your capacity because they really do have the same need?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Cam. Thanks for that. And absolutely, there are going to be times, right? But we do know that those times aren't every day, right? So that's where that flexibility comes in. So guess what? Maybe now I do have to give myself a third hour in that dedicated work time in the morning, right? Maybe I do have to give myself that extra hour. Maybe I have to shorten my workout in the morning to get that time back, to actually be able to add that to my time block and say, okay, I have to, all these things are equally important. So guess what? I need to add a little bit more time to my focus time in the morning to be able to concentrate on that. Now, always, always, always keep in mind, and you said something that was really, really impactful to me, is sometimes you do have to let things fall to the wayside, right? But when you're doing that, what are the pros and cons to that? Saying, hey, look, what are the outcomes? What are the effects of letting this fall to the wayside? 9 times out of 10, the sheer fact that you said, oh, I can let that go, that right there tells me that it's really not that important to you, or it's not important to your client. If your client says, oh, well, that's really not the priority. Okay, well, you told me initially it was the priority, but something of higher value to you came up. So something else is going to drop in priority. Again, it doesn't mean that when we say let it fall by the wayside, we're not necessarily letting it fall by the wayside. We're just reprioritizing it, right? Because again, based on that matrix, if it's high importance, high value, it's always going to be at the top. And that's what, those are the things that you're going to start to time block. Did I freeze up on you guys? That's where you're going to start that time blocking. It's like, okay, I got 4 high urgent, high priority issues that I'm working with. Now I have to figure out what blocks of time that I'm going to give it. So now I have 3 hours added to my focused time to get after those high priority things. And I'm going to spend 45 minutes on each one, right? Because I'm still going to suspense myself. I'm not going, just because it's high priority, high urgency, I'm not going to assume that it has to be done right now. I'm going to figure out and find out what is the timeline that I'm working with. Is it something that a customer or client says, I need this by Friday, or I need this by the 15th of next month, right? I am going to establish what I want to transition into is I'm going to establish a boundary, right? I have to set a boundary for any project, plan, program, anything that I'm doing. I have to create boundaries, meaning suspense dates, level of importance. All those things are crucial if you, again, the idea is to do more without being overwhelmed. And when I assign those boundaries, I personally don't take on any task without asking the question, when do you need it by? That's kind of, to me, that's kind of like the first step on how do I start to prioritize and how do I time block and how do I manage myself within the allotted time in the day. First thing I need to know is, when do you need this by? Whether it's working with my team, whether it's working with my family, whether it's working, even within myself, I set suspenses on things. It's crucial that I have a deadline because that's probably one of the most important boundaries with any task that we take on is, when does this have to be completed by? And that allows me to actually set those priorities. Again, thanks for that question, Cam. Really good question.
So I have a follow-up to that.
Go for it.
Real quick. Because you said, one of the first questions that you ask is, when do you need this by? How do you coach a client or an employee or a coworker when they obviously feel something is like, I need it done by the next 4 hours, and you're like, you really don't need that done in the next 4 hours? Like, because I think a lot of business owners struggle with that, right? Because the client's obviously like, I want it now, when in reality it's, how do you have to coach them through, like, well, you don't need it today, but within the next 72 hours we can definitely make that happen, or something of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest things that, and obviously in coaching, right, we always talk about this. When you're coaching somebody through something, you have to allow them to come up with something that's reasonable for them. So I'm going to ask a series of questions, starting off with, why does this have to be done today? Like, what is your plan? If you get this done today, what's your next step? Right? And kind of get them thinking about, oh, wait a second, if I'm not going to, I'm saying it's important that I have this done today because my timeline for that, my deadline is 4 days from now, but I need it today. So I'm asking, what do you plan on doing with it today that is going to help you make that timeline? Or can you spend an hour on it today, and then an hour on it tomorrow, and then an hour on it the next day, to now you have a complete product by that 4th day, right? So it's really questioning them on why, right? So I love that. I get asked that a lot. I get people, working in the government space, right? You guys all know about that. It's, oh my gosh, this needs to be done by this time. I was like, okay. And the next day they ask you, hey, are you done with this? I say, I thought you told me it wasn't due until, it's like, well, it is. I was like, okay, well, now I'm explaining to them, here's how I'm functioning. I do a little bit every day. Now, if you want me to update you every day on what I'm doing, hey, by all means, I can set an automatic reminder in your inbox so I don't have to do it to give you an update that, hey, from this time to this time, I was working on your project, if that'll make you feel better. So again, and that's where that automation stuff, but at the end of the day, Cam, to answer your question is, you gotta challenge them and ask them, why do you have to have this right now? Why is the importance of this What makes this so important that it has to trump all of my other priorities? And 9 times out of 10, when they really think about it, it really isn't that important. I mean, it's important, but it's not important to where, you have to stop everything you're doing right now and do my stuff. And there will be cases where you will have that. And if a client says, you know, as soon as I get this from you, I can provide my part and put this together for someone else, right? And so now the question has to be is, how bad do you want it? Right? If we have that saying, right? All money ain't good money, right? If a client comes to you and says, "Hey, I need this today," okay, now you got to ask yourself, how do you approach that? Is there an additional cost with you dropping, pushing other things to the side to take care of that client, right? Letting that client know that, hey, if this truly is your priority, then here's the effects that it's having on me by making this your priority. That's going to cost you, right? That's why we have this thing. We talk about this with tariffs and things like that. Those costs transfer to the client, to the customer, right? And so you have to set yourself up to be able to do that same thing. If you have to make someone else's priority your priority, if those are the boundaries that have to be set, right? Another thing that I like to do when it comes to those boundaries, right, is task stacking, right? You know what that task stacking is like. Emails. I love the task stack emails, right? If I'm working on something for multiple clients, or putting together a statement of work for multiple clients at the same time, and we've already established that boundary where they need this statement of work to cut a check by a certain date, I use my email. Like, I literally will send out a blast email to all the people that I'm working with. It's an automated email that I'll send them an update every day. That update will just say basically, "Hey, I haven't forgotten about you. I'm still working on this. I am on task to meet our deadline of blah blah blah." Right? And those are things that we can figure out how to automate through all the things, right? And one of the things that I really want to sum this up and finish out with is something that we all we know is necessary, and we've all had this discussion about how to properly manage meetings. Right? I do know when I was going through our weekly challenge, I thought about that, and I was looking at my calendar and I was keeping track of the things that I was doing. I have a lot of meetings in a week. Being in the government space, you know how that is. Everybody in the government wants to have a meeting every day, right? And so I had to ask myself about those meetings, right? What do those meetings look like on your calendar? Right? Are you in control of those meetings, or is someone else in control of those meetings? What flow of information is going on in those meetings? You'd be amazed at how much time we spend in a week either responding to messages, responding to emails, or sitting in meetings. I do truly believe that most of us go through our weeks, our days, and we spend an enormous amount of time doing one of those three things, if not all three of them. So making sure that we are as efficient as we possibly can be. Hey, just because something's going on, does that warrant a meeting? Like, a meeting should really, in my eyes, I feel like you can get away with 2 meetings in a week, right? And that's a kind of beginning of the week. Here's what we got going on. And at the end of the week, here's a summary of what happened. Talk to you next week, right? Anytime we start putting meetings in between, we're not efficient somewhere. We haven't properly utilized our time, because some of that stuff could have been a quick message, email. Hey, yep, got it, right? It does not require a meeting. So thinking about how we structure our time around the meetings, right? Do you have to be at all the meetings, right? Or is that something that you can delegate to somebody else? Do you have to, do you have to respond to everything? And it's kind of a revolving question, right? It's like you will know that in your system that you develop, in your when you look at how your weeks play out. Where can you implement some of these tools? Get it, they're not going to be, it's not going to be cookie cutter. Not everything that I'm going to say is going to apply to everybody, but looking at your time, looking at the time that you have in a week to figure out where you can implement these systems. Right now, the last thing that I'm going to talk about, and this is definitely to me the most important part of my day when it comes to how I manage myself in the time that I'm allotted throughout the week, and is having a shutdown ritual. Right? Does that make sense when I say a shutdown ritual? It's like at the end of the day, how do you shut down? Right? I have this thing where when I shut down at the end of the day, I look at the three priorities that I had that day. Did I complete them? Or did I achieve a level that I'm comfortable with for those tasks? So that's one thing that I do. The other thing is I set my priorities for the next day. Hey, guess what? Some of those priorities might bleed to the next day. It makes it easy. But then I figure out what's going to be my priority, so I don't have to waste time when I come in the next morning, when I start the premier working block of my day. I don't have to waste time trying to figure out what I'm going to do. So I kind of figured that out during my shutdown ritual the day prior. And then obviously I'm a huge advocate of what does my space look like that I'm going to come in the next day and get hard to work, right? It's the same thing we used to say about in the military. We talk about why it's important to have a great looking uniform, right? Because I always used to tell subordinates that if you look good, you feel good. If you feel good, you produce good, right? So the same concept applies when I do my shutdown ritual. I make sure that the space that I'm going to work in is a space that's going to welcome me the next day. I don't want to come in the next day and have to declutter and start putting things away, right? I want to come in and get straight to work. I want to focus during that time block. Like I'm not setting anything up. And I mean, again, this isn't for everybody. When I say tidy the space, if you're shooting, if you guys have the studio open at, 8 o'clock the next morning, that's going to be, you got a client that's coming in. Are you prepared for that? Was that part of your shutdown ritual, or are you having to come in early the next day to set up for it? Right? So part of your shutdown ritual for the day is to, again, evaluate what's going on the next day and say, hey, I'm going to save myself time by having this prepped before we leave today. Right? That way I don't overwhelm myself the next day, so I can come in and stay focused and get right to work. So those are just, shutdown ritual. Find a shutdown ritual that fits with your, with your tempo, right? Find that shutdown ritual and utilize that time to actually prep yourself for the next day. That is effective managing yourself within the time that's allotted for you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's what I have for today. I hope that was able to bring a little bit of value and give you a little bit of understanding on how to build basically a workflow. You're building a workflow for yourself in the allotted time throughout the week. And with that, let's open it up for discussion. Let's talk about it. I want to hear from you.
Hey Chaz, I got a question. When you were out here in Cali, I heard you mention it in the office when we were talking about the time blocking. You've obviously mentioned it a couple of times in this, so I know that you're really big with time blocking. What are some things? What are some tips that you can give to someone that has never that their days are always chaotic, or they've never time blocked before? What is maybe an example or some tips that you have for them to have that become a routine if it works for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, here's the deal. I'm gonna allow you guys to challenge me. One of you guys, give me an idea of something that's going on, a task that you have with a just a task that you have, and I'll run you through exactly my process for time blocking.
So I'll say this since it was actually mentioned on the call. So right now, one of our teams, or not one of our teams are focusing on structure in our organization, right? So specifically, standard operating procedures or SOPs, and so massive project, and which by the end we'll probably have 50 to 100 different SOPs, if not more. And so, given that, we want to obviously make it is a priority. We want to make sure that we're knocking it out as much as we can, and that we keep that momentum going so we can complete the project. So then that project can then be duplicated as we're bringing on more contractors, team members, etc.
Absolutely. Okay, so the process that I'm going to ask first is again, I'm going to run you through exactly how I process things. The first question I have is, what's your suspense date?
Perfect.
Right? What's your suspense date? So one thing that bugs me so much is as soon as possible. When people say as soon as possible, to me, that doesn't really say that it's important, right? Oh, I just need this as soon as possible. Well, is that really important? Because I'm going to say give me a suspense, because that is very important in how I figure out my block. So once I have that date, I'm gonna look at it and say, okay, with everything else that I got, with my normal daily routine, the things that I do, how much time is it going to take me to complete those SOPs, right? If it's going to be a long SOP, I'm like, okay, I'm going to need approximately, let's say 4 hours to really focus on this SOP. Right? Now that I know that I need 4 hours to do that, I'm going to start splitting up that time between now and that deadline. And I'm going to give myself some time. Hey, look, there's going to be times where you might only be able to give 15 minutes to a task per day, but you can get a lot done in that 15 minutes. Why? Because the next thing I'm going to do is, okay, if I've only given myself 15 minutes to do this per day or every other day based on my themed day, right? Because I break things out in themes, right? I set themes for the day. Mondays for this, Tuesdays for this, Wednesdays for this, Thursdays for this, Fridays for this. Now I figure out which theme day that goes into. Now, how much time am I going to be able to allot to that during those theme days? And it might be only 15 minutes. Once I've discovered that, the next thing I'm asking is, can I automate or can I automate this, or can I delegate this? Right? Automate might be something as simple as, hey, I know what I want my standard operating procedures to say. Allow me to prompt ChatGPT to give me an outline, right? So now I have an outline that I didn't have to spend, two blocks of my time just figuring out an outline for it. I was able to prompt ChatGPT to tell me, hey, this is what I want this SOP to say. Give me an outline. Now that it's given me an outline, now I can take those 15 minutes that I've locked to actually read through, make any fine adjustments, right? Whatever, and then move on to the next item. I spent 15 minutes on it this day. I'll get back to it. I was disciplined enough to shut it down because I'm effectively working on it every block that I've given it. That way, by the time that suspense date comes, I have a somewhat polished format to be able to say, here's what I have. Now let's look at it as a team and figure out if this is the most effective way to do it. And oh, by the way, it might be the most effective at that time, but we may, as we're putting this into use, we may get to a time where we have to kind of adjust it or simplify or even rework it based on new requirements, things of that nature. The idea is, I don't need to spend 3 hours today trying to come up with an SOP. If my suspense is, but I think it's very important that we set that boundary and have that suspense there. I do feel like that is probably one of the most crucial parts, is having that timeline built to where you can then effectively time block it. That makes sense.
Appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely.
Coach Rowe, what's up, man? I'd be real interested. I know you got a lot of things going on. I'd be real interested in how you're able to manage yourself in the time that you have.
Yeah, I use the quiet hours. So I shifted my wake up time to 4 a.m. Because at 4 a.m. I don't have the concerns of my wife needing my attention. I don't have the concerns of people texting me at 4 a.m. in the morning, unless it's Cam because he's up at the time that I'm up. There's a lot less noise and distraction. And to your point on being able to set these intentional time blocks, especially when you know the thing that you're working on has a pretty good window of opportunity to work on it. I'm very strategic in that. So, for instance, for me, in setting up the community, the men's circle, I really had to be intentional about what I was doing prior to the launch. I knew when I was going to do my soft launch. I knew when I was going to launch. And here's everything that I have to get done. Okay, what's most important? Well, I am going to need to do some testing on this custom app that I've developed. So I got to get that built. Obviously, I can't get that built 2 days before the soft launch. I have to get that built sooner so that I have time to now set intentional time for UAT testing. And in the same regard, now that I'm gotten to the soft launch, the next step for me is okay. Now I want to set intentional time to set up strategy for what the cadence of my content, my recorded content specifically, will be, what that cadence looks like, what the cadence of course development and release looks like. Now I'm setting the intentional time blocks for that strategy. So then I can say, okay, now I know I want to have 12 courses this year, and I want to release 3 courses a quarter in the middle of every quarter. Now that I know that, then I can start setting those intentional time blocks for that as well. So same concept of time blocking, but I shift between, number one, giving myself the time where you set that prime time of your day. The prime time of my day is the morning. I'm the most productive. I have the most inspiration, and conceptually can come up with things a lot better at that time. So I pushed that time to a space to where it's like I have even more of that time. But it goes back and forth between working, setting time blocks, and then switching from working in the time blocks to working time blocks to develop strategy, to then go back to work time blocks within that strategy.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Yeah. It's ironic that you actually said that. One of the things that we started out with was, I was talking about that, is finding that prime time of your day. And you're not special, Billy. Just here to let you know, because most people, that they may not want to admit to it, but I was talking a little bit about the psychological studies that have gone into the human behavior, where humans are intrinsically more productive in the morning.
So,
Awesome.
so I want to add something too. Is like, I think sometimes stuff like this can be very initially overwhelming for people because it seems like a lot of massive changes very quickly. So for instance, I was talking to uh someone in my family this over the weekend, and they were telling me like, I'm just not, I was like, how are you doing? They said, oh, I haven't been working out as much as I need to be, and getting up early, and this and this. And I said, hey, look, just start with getting up. You don't have to get up at 4 a.m. like I do. Just start with 6 a.m. 6 a.m. is early for you. And instead of like, I gotta get up at 6, now I gotta work out right away. Like, just practice the habit of getting up at 6. Once you get comfortable with that, maybe you don't even go into working out. Maybe you just start stretching. Hey, I'm gonna get up at 6. Then I'm gonna get comfortable with like moving my body. Then once that's become a habit, now I'm up at 6, I'm exercising, and then you just move through that. And I said, I know this person very well, and I said one of the reasons you're not doing it is because it seems like a very large, overwhelming task to just start doing all of a sudden. So break that task up into pieces, as we're talking about now, and once it becomes a part of your kind of daily being, it becomes a lot more manageable.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I'm gonna be perfect, honest, and transparent here. You know how many times I've gotten up, gotten ready, got in my car, drove to the gym, sat there, and didn't even go into the gym, right? And the only reason, I mean, seriously, but that's how I started creating the habit. When I first started, there was no way I was mentally prepared to go to the gym 6 days a week like I do. Right? There was lots of days where, but I went through the process. I created the habit of getting up, getting ready, moving, going to the gym, and then, like I said, I still to this day, there's times that I don't want to go to the gym. Today was actually one of those days, but guess what? I still did it, and I went to the gym. And I sat there. I gave myself a little extra time because I knew the gym didn't open up until 6. But I got to the gym at about 5:30 because I gave myself 30 minutes to decide whether or not I was actually going to go into the gym or not when it opened. Right? So absolutely, Cam, you're spot on. Don't try to make all these adjustments. Just find one little thing that you can actually start and be intentional about and be disciplined about to create that habit every day. Awesome. Well, that's all that I have, you guys. I hope this was beneficial, like I said. And once again, I'm going to foot stomp this. If you need some help in this area, I am inviting you to come and join us for the elevation experience in March, where we are going to actually help you build these types of strategies in your life and in your business. Boom, Cam, over to you, buddy. You can take us home.
Hey, everybody, have a good weekend. We are week 12. All right, we've been getting it. As always, we appreciate everybody who has taken the time to join the community, who takes the time to come on our calls, who takes the time to ask us about what we got going on. We know it's the day after Thanksgiving, but we have built this habit. And we had to talk this week. Hey guys, yes, we are. And not only are we going to do it, we're going to go live so we can show you guys that we are still doing this, even though, a lot of people are like, hey, it's the day after Thanksgiving, and we still want to bring that value, right? Because it don't stop just because we ate some turkey. And so that being said, or a seafood boil like Glenn. But with that being said, I hope you all have a great weekend, and we will see you guys all later. Peace.